we're going to be covering maximizing your agency's collaboration with Microsoft SharePoint. So without further ado, we'll get started. So what is SharePoint Services? We're going to also cover creating your site. We're going to show you some good tips and tricks and a neat tool on how to really get your plan organized for building your SharePoint site. And then before we wrap it up, we're going to show you what's really possible with the full SharePoint site that I've created, just to show you how it can all come together. So what is WSS 3.0? And that's what we're going to be calling it here, is WSS, and that stands for Windows SharePoint Services. Windows SharePoint Services is Microsoft's free intranet program. Their current version is at 3.0. There's a new version coming out shortly, and that's going to be called SharePoint Foundation 2010. So for now, SharePoint Services 3.0 again is a free program. The system requirements are not very high, but one of them is that you have to have a Windows 2003 server. So really, any agency or business with a Windows 2003 server can be running SharePoint as their intranet. Depending on how many files and how long you're going to keep it and how big you're really going to make it, you'll then of course have to have hard drive size in mind. Also note too that to make sure you're backing up your SharePoint properly, if you're still using Backup Exec or other tape backup software like that, is they do have add-ons to make backing up your SharePoint more robust, where you can restore individual items instead of the whole thing at once, kind of like you can with new Exchange servers nowadays. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop right into creating your SharePoint site. A couple assumptions we're going to make here is that SharePoint's already been installed on your server. We're not going to go through installing it here in the demos today, but that's something that your tech support people should be able to do within about an hour, hour and a half or so. There's some extra special things to do if you're running it on an Exchange server, but it'll still work there as well. So we're going to jump right over to our SharePoint site, and we'll show everybody what it looks like. So here's our SharePoint. You'll see it's just a pretty simple and easy to look at website. Again, the nice thing about SharePoint, you really don't have to have any kind of computer programming or web programming or database knowledge at all to manage it and work with it. It's all navigable with a simple point-and-click interface. So you see here, if I want to go into any section, you just simply click on it, and now you're there. As you build your SharePoint up and you get more and more content, wherever you're clicking, you're going to have a little navigation path up here. So you can see I went from my team site to announcements, so this makes it easy to remember where you're at and track back to where you want to get to. So we can click this to go back to our home page, and this is the exact site you're going to see once SharePoint's been installed. This is like the basic template, and this is what you'll be starting off with. So basically everything in SharePoint is just a list of stuff. That's the easiest way to look at it. These different lists of stuff, they're all called web parts. So for example, I have a web part here for announcements. I have another calendar type web part. I have a links type web part. So there are different kinds of web parts, but they're all the same thing, and they're really a list of items, but they display in different ways, and they have different customizable options. You'll notice as we make more and more sites, you see the different sites up top here. This is the navigation menu. On the left-hand side, you'll also see links, and these can be for different parts of your SharePoint as well. You have a fully functioning search on the top right that can search through all the different content, the announcements, calendars, documents, contact lists, and so on. Whatever content you may have, this search can search through all that. Very, very powerful tool. You'll notice the Site Actions button. This is where we're going to be doing a lot of customizing and creating. Then once your site's laid out, you'll probably seldomly be using this function. In here, this is where you would make new content. You would make new web parts to then display on your page. If you choose Edit Page, that's when you take all the parts that you've created and actually put them out there. Because by creating a contact list, it's not on your website. You have to then edit the page and put it there. And then site settings is where you're going to find all the simple and easy to use administration. So what we'll do is I'll show you what some of the basic web parts are. And I'm going to do this by going onto Site Actions and clicking Create. You'll see here it says you can create a new library, list, web page to the website. And these are all the different choices of web parts that you have to put on your site. A document library is just that, and you'll notice that when I hover over any one of these items, it'll give you a little description above of what you can do with it. Document library is just a place to store documents. You can also have folders inside of these libraries to keep them further organized. What this would do is, say replace the public area or like the documentation place that you might have on your F drive or P drive sitting out there on your server. Some of the powerful features that SharePoint brings, though, that you don't have with just a normal server is called document versioning. And what that can do is every time a document is edited, it'll keep a version history of that, and your users or whoever can record notes on what they were doing during this editing. So after 3, 4, 5 edits, you might realize that there's some stuff missing in a document. But you have the option, because of SharePoint built-in versioning, to go back to any copy of that document back in time. Of course, you just have to, again, watch out for how much hard drive space that you've got. Because if you've got thousands of documents on there that have all been edited several times, you now have 3,000 documents being stored on your server. It keeps it all in the background, though, so it's very simple. Forms library. This is a library custom built for forms. It's can be used with an XML editor like Microsoft InfoPath. So if you're using InfoPath for any of your forms, SharePoint's built right around to be able to make the forms integrated there very easily. You can make a wiki. If anybody's been to Wikipedia, this can be the same type of thing. You can have your own internal wiki on your SharePoint intranet site. I'll show you some uses for this in a little bit and some ideas that other agencies have had on it. You can make a picture library. Now you can put pictures in a document library too, but the difference with a picture library is you can turn the library into like thumbnail view, so you can look at them just as you would a web page with a bunch of thumbnails and pictures. Click on each one, and then of course it'll blow it up and you'll see it full size. Announcements you already saw. That was one of the basic items that'll show up on our template. And that could be used to, just share news or give other kind of bulletins or announcements. Nice feature about announcements and some other content in SharePoint is not only versioning, but then the ability to expire content. So say we make an announcement on Monday, happy birthday to Bob coming up on Friday. It doesn't make sense to have that announcement there any further after Friday. So when you're creating it, you can actually tell it to expire on Saturday. So when Saturday comes around, that announcement automatically goes away. Contact lists are just that. You can take your contact list right out of Microsoft Outlook, export them to a CSV file, and then import them right into SharePoint, so you don't have to do any recreation of all your data. Discussion board is you can have your own news groups. And again, any one of these things, you can have as many of them as you want. So you can set up news groups for anything from discussion on a certain project or a job to just a general one for interdepartmental conversation. Links, you again saw that was on our template as well, and that's just a place where you can have a links library. A lot of agencies have found this very useful to maintain their links in SharePoint rather than having the users keep track of all their own favorites, just to keep everything more centralized. But you can also put notes in your links too. Great for storing things like the passwords for the agency's access. Calendar. Just like you would imagine you can have a calendar in Outlook, you can have a calendar in SharePoint. The neat thing right now is with a calendar in SharePoint, you can actually view it in Outlook, though it will be view only. You can have a task list, and with a task list in SharePoint, you have all the same options as you do with a task list in Outlook. Project tasks are similar.